One of the big news items up here in Canada over the last couple of days has been the release of this guy, Omar Khadr, who was convicted of war crimes in Afghanistan. This is a young guy who, I guess when he was about 15 years old, he was engaged in conflict with American troops, and he threw a grenade at a non-combatant, um, a medic, and then he was captured. He was brought to Guantanamo Bay. He was tortured. He was made to admit to war crimes, and so he confessed, and then he had to apologize to the family. He's been in prison ever since, and then just the other day here in Alberta, Calgary court released him, and so it's kind of got people arguing over whether or not he should be released. And I just saw something on Facebook from one of my friend's daughters who had been in the military in Afghanistan, and she was all upset that this guy was getting released. And I went on Facebook and I kind of argued with her or told her I disagreed, and we got arguing back and forth, and then another vet from that war got into it and was insulting me and this kind of a thing. So I'm doing the usual, my usual response to that kind of social situation. I'm putting my own video on YouTube and saying what I want as a passive aggressive way of dealing with it, but I couldn't argue with them anymore because they got to the point where they're just calling me pussy and faggot and stuff because I disagreed with them. So anyway, my perspective on this guy is, if you're a 15-year-old kid and a foreign army invades your land and you have the guts to fight against them, I don't think you're a criminal. I think you're pretty much a war hero in that case. And I think it's really a lopsided state of affairs that the US and Canada and Britain can just go wherever they want, start a bunch of bullying and killing people, start wars, and then dictate the rules, right? They're going by these rules. They argue that he's a war criminal because he didn't follow the UN rules against assaulting a non-combative. But this was a 15-year-old kid. What does he care who's a non-combative or not when he's got a foreign army that's invading where he lives? I mean, I don't know if he was actually from Afghanistan or a neighboring country. My understanding is that his dad drove him into the conflict and dropped him off to go fight. But in either case, that's his territory, that's his land, and we're the invaders, right? We're the bad guys, and we got no right going in there and then saying, "Oh, well, these are the rules you got to play by because we're at war with you, so you got to play by our rules." So you got a 15-year-old kid, gutsy enough to try to take out one of the enemy, whether he's a medic or whatever. I wouldn't care who it was. If it's a part of an invading army, then I think you got every right as a local to try to kill that person because they're invading your country. Doesn't matter if they're combative or non-combative or what have you. So I totally agree with what this guy did, and by all accounts and everything you see about him, this is not a warlike kind of a guy. This is just a guy who is caught up in the circumstances. I'm not saying he's a victim. when I was arguing on Facebook, people were getting confused, and they were saying, you painting him as a victim, and if he was shooting at you, you don't think you'd shoot back and stuff. Yeah, of course. Even if he was a 15-year-old kid shooting at me and stuff, of course I'd shoot back. But what I wouldn't do is capture him and then call him a war criminal because he engaged in a fight that was, put upon him where he lives by an invading army. So I think it's bullshit, and I can see why the courts let him go. We can't just go around bullying people, and when they fight back, we call them terrorists and war criminals. That's bogus, and especially not kids. So my perspective on it is, maybe the the UN rules of war need to be revisited, and we need to understand that, as an imperial colonial force, if you go somewhere and somebody fights back against you, that's never an act of terrorism, and that's never a war crime. That's somebody defending their country. We're not defending our country when we go over to these places. We're invading. We're invading somebody else's country, and guys like this, Omar, are defending their country. Get it? So that's my opinion on it. And I can understand, people that went over and fought over there and stuff from here, and they have this perspective that anybody that fights back against them is a bad guy. I can understand having a hatred against somebody for joining in the fight or whatever, or being an enemy, but they're not criminal. If anybody, you're the criminal. You went over to their country. So that's my perspective.